Hello, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association, and it's a pleasure to have you join us for this IPA podcast, and always a pleasure to have State Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Smith, joining me here on the line. Tony, thanks for joining me as we head into this warm fall season, apparently, with this 90-degree weather. We're recording this on September 20th, but thanks for your time. Sure appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jason. It's a great opportunity. Thank you for having me.
So, a lot of things cooking right now, Tony, but just thought it'd be nice to hear if you've got any just quick opening thoughts as we're about 5 or 6 weeks into the school year, depending where you are. Any things you're seeing out there in particular, or things you wouldn't mind commenting on?
Well, it's been definitely an exciting start to the year. I mean, obviously there was a little bit of a specter there about would there be funding, wouldn't there be, but the fact that we did get the funding, and we'll get into that in some more depth, I think, as we talk, but just the spirit and the engagement. I've been out in districts and traveling around the state, and the kinds of work that teachers are doing with students, and I will say I've been in some technology and whether it's Project Lead the Way or just, I was in a classroom in Hillside and kids were talking about the mission to Mars and what would they have to be thinking about to actually live on Mars. I mean, and these are, middle school kids. Just what our students are wrestling with and thinking about, and, even the kind of the bigger politics, the issues of, who belongs here, the questions about the deferred action. And what the kids are talking about and how they're talking about it, just the level of engagement. It's a good time to be an educator in Illinois, and kids are wrestling with real problems, both in the kind of personal and in their communities, but also just the larger global issues. And I think as teachers and educators, it's a time to really be helping kids solve the bigger problems. And, I'm seeing teachers and principals excited about doing that. So it's been a pretty amazing start to the year. And in fact, I'll be in Peoria tomorrow, the competency-based pilot, the 10 districts that are working on the high school competency work are coming together. I mean, just so many really good things and a lot of positive energy out there, Jason.
Yeah, that's terrific. And those middle school kids working on what you need in Mars, I might need to talk to them, because occasionally I think my wife and my kids would like for me to be there.
Well, I hear you.
So, anyway, seriously here, you kind of started off, with the issue of funding. Now it appears we've got kind of that dark cloud past us, the uncertainty of that, which is great, and we sure appreciate of course, the work that you guys were constantly doing with that, and running numbers and handling all the requests that were coming in from all over the place, and sure appreciate all the advocates and the legislators, grinding it through to get us done to this point. But it's sure nice to be in the position we're in now. And before we got recording here, we were talking briefly about the stakeholders meeting that took place that you do frequently with all the different groups to discuss things that are happening. And we had a pretty robust conversation related to school funding. So just from your perspective, Tony, what happens now moving forward as we look at implementing this new formula, and what type of partnership are you guys really looking to engage school districts with now to make sure that things are done right?
Yeah, I think the recognition of all the work that's gone into getting us to this moment is really important. Before we dive right into what we're going to do, I do want to take time to just honor and recognize, for example, Chairman Meeks, our board chairman at the state agency, obviously was in the Senate for a long time and carried legislation for 10 consecutive years,
right,
trying to move to a more fair and equitable funding system. And so Chairman Meeks, just direct appreciation to him, obviously a ton of other folks and staff at the agency and I think people close to the work like you, Jason, know this, but, staff did more than 60 different models.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that kind of work to take the big ideas, the math, and then language, and then run that model all the way through is pretty extraordinary time and a pretty amazing contribution. So just recognition to legislators, advocates, everybody that's been working on this for a long time, and to our staff internally. I think the moment is extraordinary in the sense of really looking at the adequacy target and how people can locally say, here's what it's going to take to educate kids where we are, and here's how much we have to do that. And the question of, equity being the primary driver now. So folks who need more resources in Illinois can get more resources to provide a quality education. And in terms of the long-term health and well-being of our state, having a well-educated populace is essential, right? So It's a deep investment in the present and the future of Illinois to have a more fair system of funding, so that it's not just, those that are wealthy get a high-quality education.
Right.
Every single child in Illinois deserves access to a high-quality education. So now with that system of funding, we can begin to move in that direction. It's going to take some time, though, right, to figure out the new system. How do you collect the data required? This is definitely a learning year, and I think most folks know that we pushed out the base funding minimum, so the dollars that people are getting right now are really based on last year. Right. And now we'll be in a process of kind of figuring out over the course of the year how to true that up, how to get to the base amount that will be the target for the ongoing years. And so we've got some learning to do. We'll be doing, podcasts and webinars throughout the course of the year, working in some pilot districts to really understand at the local level what this is going to take. But yeah, the time is different for sure. More funding and more fair funding. So we're in a good spot.
Well, and I think the timing of this just couldn't be better when you think about, ESSA's, Illinois' ESSA Plan being approved, where, as we look at how we hold schools accountable, schools also can point to, hey, we're good being held accountable here, but these are the real resources that we need that have been identified using research, sound research, in order for us to get from where we are to where we need to be. And, I've always kind of lived by the adage that expectation minus resources usually leads to frustration. And so now we can kind of help people understand really where the resource gap is and what needs to be given in order to get us where we need to go. So the timing of this seems to be pretty good.
I think it's extraordinary. Just one bit of that, the ability to be honest about that percent of adequacy.
Yeah.
People have talked for a long time about, the haves and the have-not. Like, it's been kind of a binary conversation. And now to actually be more sophisticated in our analysis and be able to help have a deeper conversation about where are you in terms of how close are you to that target, right. And, or how far away are you? And then we can actually start to get more support in places that need more support. I'm pretty excited about the kind of specificity we can get to, because also to your point, like, if you get frustrated, it's maybe people don't understand the situation you're in. Mm-hmm. You actually don't know exactly what the targets are that you need. With more information and these resources now more publicly understood, I think we're going to have a different kind of conversation in the state about what our kids deserve and how we can get those resources to the kids who need it the most.
No doubt. Well, during our stakeholder meeting yesterday, Tony, I think we had a lot of information, shared a lot of different things, but it seemed to me one of the things that you were most explicit about during that meeting was just about the importance this year in particular with the new formula that we get this first year right. And you really emphasize that. And so obviously there's got to be good partnership between the state board and school districts to make sure that we get this thing right. So, as you think about that, what do school districts need to be making sure that they're doing to help, the state board get this right, because everything from here on out now is going to be based on what happens this year.
Yes, I think that the importance of asking questions right now, like being really clear about the questions at the local level, like how should we be codifying our local salary? How should we, like, making sure that everybody's engaged in this process? Mm-hmm. And we're going to be, we the state agency will be saying, here are the questions we're getting. We're going to be publishing the frequently asked questions. We'll do the webinars kind of tied to the timing when things like, okay, student count, like let's get that in, what's happening, how do you count this in the system? To your point, at the end of this year, this will be the new baseline. Mm-hmm. This is a critical year to really be deeply engaged with your reporting, and if you got a question, whether it's the Principal Association, ESSA, any organization you're connected to, push your questions. Obviously, the state board, we need to hear your questions, because also there are some issues just in the legislation itself that need to be clarified, right? So now's the time to be, speak now, really, right. And we got to get this figured out over the course of the year.
Absolutely. Well, in any given year, Tony, the funding issue by itself would be very significant, but we have other significant things happening, and obviously, the passage of ESSA not long ago, and now Illinois getting its ESSA Plan approved is extremely significant. So we've got that, and we're through that process, and now we have to move forward from that. So from your perspective, kind of what's the path forward with regards to our ESSA Plan?
Yeah, so August 30th, I spoke to the secretary, and she was complimentary on our process, the level of engagement. And I think most people in the state understand this because they experienced it, but we've been recognized for the level of engagement, the not just the number of meetings, but the depth and the revisions and the multiple drafts. So we got some good recognition nationally for our process. And so part of how I see us going forward is that was the start of this work. That was like getting into relationship to figure out how best to create the conditions to support all districts to be providing the very best opportunity for kids. And kind of as we were talking about the funding, that our process now is really about capacity building. How do we make sure that in places where kids are getting the support they need, the educators and community members are figuring out how to connect good practice and funding, and in like communities, and more we're going to be doing much more kind of like or comparative districts, and being able to see growth and using information to help get more support for folks. It's a pretty exciting time in terms of a different mechanism for support. It's not purely on attainment anymore, right? So growth is really the primary part of our accountability system. So where people are demonstrating that they're figuring out ways to get the things that kids need to those kids and making gains, that's stuff we want to learn from. So an inquiry-driven system, kind of an appreciative inquiry, like what's working. So the way we've talked about doing the assessments locally are really built on the Illinois Balanced Accountability Measure Committee, having that rubric. So the things that we've written into the ESSA Plan now over the course of this year, we're going to be learning how to do some of these things, to do the deep review and structure of governance, teaching and learning, safe and healthy climate, and how we actually come to understand how well schools and districts are doing in those areas will be the content for how we start kind of connecting and facilitating support. This whole thing officially launches in August of 18. So we've got time to continue to build on those relationships that we started over the last year and a half around these real questions, and kind of figure out how we're going to do this together.
So obviously, Tony, from how reading through the ESSA Plan, and I know from your communication, ultimately what we're from what I gather, that you're trying to do from the agency's perspective is really provide equitable support to schools and helping them do better by their students. But I also know from the field, they are going to be curious about, when will we start seeing the designations from the accountability side of things start to come. So, when you mentioned 2018, is it that when we would start seeing those kinds of things come, for schools to prepare for that, just so that they have an idea of what they're in store for as time moves forward?
Yeah, so this is the year that we're taking now. We've got 3 years of assessment of readiness, the PARC data, that we've got 3 years of that data. Mm-hmm. We've got we just now finally have the framework approved, right? So August 30th, right. The framework's approved. And now we start going through it and looking at all those indicators. And this is how we start doing district profiles, school profiles. So the work over the course of this year is, in fact, to establish the membership in those different tiers of performance. Mm-hmm. And I really want folks to hear this, and it'll only be evidenced over time. And you have to build trust and behave in trustworthy ways. The purpose of these tiers is really to provide support. Like, I start from a place of deep belief that educators are doing their very best to serve the needs of children. I can tell you, right? Just keeping it real, there are schools where you walk in and the spirit is like, how do we get kids to obey? How do we get kids to do what they're supposed to do? Mm-hmm. And other places where they're saying, how do we meet the needs of these children? How do we organize ourselves to create opportunities for learning? Those are things we need to understand. And the kinds of things that are happening in those different kinds of schools are pretty significantly different. We need to make sure that as a public school system, the 852 districts across the state, that we are creating the conditions for children to thrive, right? Mm-hmm. That's in the long-term best interest of the state. And if we're not doing that, we need help to do that better. That's the only reason we should be in public schools, is to create the conditions for kids to know more and do better, right? Yeah. So that's going to be the conversation over the next year.
Yeah. Well, and I think pivoting to one other thing I wanted to bring up that will be a support of this, Tony, is and I, speaking as a former high school principal, I'm really excited about this, particularly as I've seen what College Board is doing to support students taking the SAT. Is now you guys are going to reimburse schools for the PSAT, and I think that's terrific, and it will be a wonderful support for kids, moving forward with regards to what we're trying to get done in the ESSA Plan.
Yeah, there are many things to be excited about, for sure.
Yeah.
And this is, I heard over the last year and a half, hey, the move to SAT, some people were kind of really excited about it. There were a lot of questions. Increasingly, people have come to understand, all the supports, the free supports, the Khan Academy, mm-hmm. Paying for a high-quality college entrance exam, all of that. And then there are a number of districts that were doing the PSAT and, increasing access to AP, and even some districts kind of doing the middle school stuff with Springboard, and just kept hearing over and over, hey, is there any way we can get some support for this? This PSAT is really important. Right. And obviously this idea of a growth metric in high school, but we were able to get the cost of other accountability assessments driven down, and in our assessment line item, we started having conversation around the table, what's the best use of these dollars? And mm-hmm. honestly, coming right from the field was this request. And so, put it to the board, and they agreed with that. And so, yeah, we're able to provide one administration of the PSAT, mm-hmm. To all 9th and 10th graders this year. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, and fortunately, we've had an opportunity to, here in our office, sit down with Horban Pori from College Board, and he's walked us through the platform, which continues to get better since the last time I saw it. It's really exciting, and I think we got to make sure that we're in there and utilizing the tools, and we're planning on here creating some asynchronous courses and other things to hopefully help get people trained up, not just administrators, but also teachers utilizing those things as well through Ed Leaders Network and in other places too. So just there's a lot of things I know we could dig into deep with regards to ESSA, Tony, but just these few items prove to be pretty exciting. Though there's still things about the plan and other things that have to be fleshed out. For example, you've got some of the P2 indicators and such that we're still trying to nail down on. So I know some of this stuff is a bit fluid, but it feels like things are really starting to come together.
Absolutely. And that's why I think the way I've been talking about this is building on the relationships that we were developing and kind of reconnecting on some and new connections in other ways, that the dialogue continues, that it wasn't like we just went out, did some public meetings and then we've submitted a plan. We were building the network to be able to keep having these conversations. And so the P2 indicator, the technical advisory committee to actually figure out the right weighting and the process for how to do some of this accountability. I mean, that's real work that's continuing to happen. Right. And we're trying to do in as public a fashion as possible. This is my whole thing about this takes building trust, and there's there's a history of particularly with just an attainment accountability system, this idea of good and bad. And I really do want to get to a much more developmental space where, as educators, part of the thing is we're trying to get better at stuff.
Right.
And if you're just told what you're not, that's not a really good way to encourage and build up and increase competency. So the system now around competency and improvement, really moving this way is a narrative that's going to have to be both, built together and will happen over time. We're going to have to replace some old bad habits and develop some new ones. So that's what this year is really about. And, when things go well, let's celebrate them. And when they don't, let's take them head on. And I think that's how you build good relationships.
Well, and I think the plan itself just lends itself to what you're describing there, because if necessary, the plan itself can change, right? I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about ESSA now versus NCLB and previous accountability measures we've had.
No, exactly right. And so if things in the plan aren't making sense, and as we do them, we learn more, that's the expectation that we're updating it. So that's the approach, and that's what the board is really committed to. We try to be good at the board level with keeping them engaged. And for example, at the board retreat, a year ago, we took that college and career readiness, and the board approved a working description so that they could get out there and get kind of pounded on by community input, change, and we got a kind of a working draft that's in the plan now, and P20 and all kinds of folks really have taken that, and that's how you're going to actually make something that is, really shared and owned by the state, is by making some decisions that the state board can, and then putting it out there, and let's really figure out what the best way to go about things are.
You bet. So last thing I want to touch base with you about, Tony, and of course it takes people to get all this stuff done, and I know you had some pretty significant conversations with the board here recently with regards to our teacher corps and concerns about shortages out in the field. Obviously, our people are very interested in that because, one, they're hiring, concerned about the candidate pools they've got, and also this trickles down even to the substitute corps, and as we've had other conversations about, we got principals probably on a weekly basis that are filling in classrooms and such just because they don't have enough substitute teachers. And I don't really want to deal with the sub issue as much as I know you guys are really, and I appreciate this, gonna look at the teacher shortage issue very seriously and are going to be doing some deep study of that here in the weeks and months to come.
We are, and before I dive into that, just to highlight and recognize again the role of the principal. It is one of the more challenging roles in any industry, but to really recognize the amount of work that principals are doing right now in light of the teacher shortage and just how stretched they are, and the way principals are working hard to be instructional leaders. You need a little bandwidth to do that, and so many of our principals are stretched beyond reason, and we've got a pipeline issue on the principalship as well. That's which so just recognizing that, but right now we have decided to focus at the board level and do a year of inquiry on the teacher shortage. We got somewhere, it's a rough number, but more than 1,000 unfilled classrooms right now across the state. A majority of the districts in Illinois have less than 100 staff, and so we've got a single missing teacher in any district is a big deal. Yeah. And we've got work to do to figure out both the pipeline issue. I think we've got work to do as a country, but definitely as a state. I think there's been, you kind of started with the dark cloud idea of, funding and uncertainty. You got a bunch of issues around everything from stability in funding. Will districts be funded or not? That's been a specter to, retirement issues. So just the conditions around the profession in the state have got to stabilize, but just the story also that we tell about what teachers are doing. I think there's such remarkable work happening, and just the things I've seen at the start of this school year. The individual teachers have done so much. You walk into a classroom and it's just, every single desk has some kind of unique thing connected to the student and their unique superpower, and the teachers figured out how to have each student have their own unique identity demonstrated on the desk. That takes hours and hours, and just that energy and gift to make every single kid feel super special and important in that room. It's that Herb Cole stuff about, I don't care what you know until I know you care. Yeah. We have teachers who are creating that condition every single day for kids, and they're just excelling. And so how do we tell that story in a way that has people understand just really the extraordinary work that teachers do every day? And so that narrative, and then, how do we understand the work of licensure and to make it, more possible for teachers to, get into classrooms? What's the licensure work? Higher ed, like making sure the teachers are prepared day one. Obviously, you develop mastery over time, but you got to have at least a sense of what it's going to be like when you walk in the classroom. Right. Too many of our teachers are reporting pretty significant disconnect between their preparation and their experience, and diversifying the pipeline. We got a whole bunch of folks in classrooms now that are not seeing teachers that look like them, and so how are we going to have these conversations? We've made a commitment with the board over the next year to do an inquiry into all these areas and to come back to them and with some deep study and deep opportunity to be engaged with the board and community members and partners and, the union leadership in the state, different teacher organizations, principal organizations. This is all of us. It's all hands on deck as far as I'm concerned, and getting us all on the same page. And just critical. If we have funding, we got ESSA, and if we don't have teachers in classrooms, it's pretty much all for naught, man.
Agreed. Well, and I would encourage listeners, if you're interested in the process that the inquiry process that you're looking at, go take a look at the board retreat packet here from the most recent board meeting. I know you had a presentation from Dr. Libby Gill, your Chief Education Officer, and I know Dr. Helfer, who we worked with on many things, is going to be involved with this as well. I think, and I've taken a look, and a lot of the critical questions that are being asked there are some of the right ones, and I'm sure would be open to looking at what other things are on people's minds. Because one of the things that came to mind for me, Tony, was just how current teachers feel about their job and how they're communicating how they feel about that job to even their students who more than likely are going to be where the pool of educators are going to be coming from, right? Like my daughter, who's my oldest, my only daughter, I asked her already, starting to get in this conversation, like, all right, getting close to high school, what are you thinking about post-high school? And it's, right now for her, it's between being a veterinarian and a high school history teacher. So she's kind of on a lot of different ends of the spectrum there. And, and I'm not ready yet to have that real conversation with her about, though I'm talking about the positives of education, obviously the fulfillment I found in this job, but also wanting her to have a real clear view of what the position holds. And so I think looking at and talking with current teachers obviously is pretty important, all of that.
Oh, absolutely. And then even some of the structural issues, some high schools have created pathways where it's an education pathway.
Yes.
And how are we going to have the conversation really about, young people's passion to teach and connect and take care of and educate, and have that be fostered? Our teachers have been pretty beaten down recently, so how do we kind of reinvigorate them, create the kind of protected pathway for young people who think they might want to get into the profession, and then, hold on to folks, as the turnover issue is significant. So, it's all of this, and the questions, to your point, that we put in the packet, we want to try to get at the real stuff and not do kind of a polished, like, here are all the answers. We wanted to kind of put the thorny questions at the front end and engage people on this, because, I don't think there are simple answers, and it's such a big issue, and some people think, it's just a rural issue. It's not. It's rural, suburban, urban. It's across the board. So this is an Illinois issue, and obviously it's even bigger for the Midwest. But we got to address it in Illinois, and we're anybody who can, has time, willing, we'll take all comers on this one.
Absolutely. Well, we got to have folks in order to get it done. So, Tony, we've covered a lot of meaty stuff here, and I sure appreciate your time. And, of course, we're looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks at our fall conference coming up here in October. Always appreciate that. Of course, in October we celebrate National Principals Month, and we appreciate your engagement and support of that as well. But I got to tell you, I know this teacher shortage issue is a tough one. But that aside, it's fun to be talking about what we're doing and can move forward with, and not have these lingering questions of, is funding going to be there, and are we going to get the ESSA plan approved? It felt like for a long time we were having those two lingering questions. Well, those are now answered, and now we get to finally move forward.
Yeah, to me, a chance for us as educators to dig in together and work more deeply to meet the needs of kids, but also to take care of each other and see that we're all in this together. And now with the new funding system, really figuring out how folks who are kind of furthest away from adequacy are going to get more resources. But in the end, we will all benefit as a state. I just think this idea of equity is not some kind of way out there thing. It's just the superior growth strategy. It's more of our young people are more prepared for the future and can be kind of economically and civically engaged and secure. That just bodes well for all of us for the long haul. So, I'm pretty fired up too. I think it's a good time.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Smith, sure appreciate your time as always, and look forward to future podcasts down the road. My name's Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association, again joined by our State Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Smith. As always, if there's anything the IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out and give us a call, or find us on the web at www.ilprincipals.org. Take care.